welcome to our Bible overview study. We've been going over the Mosaic Law for the last few weeks. A lot of confusing things, a lot of details there. I think I mentioned there's 114 chapters from Exodus 20 to Deuteronomy 34. Most of that is law. We try to break it up into different sections. The main thing to remember when it comes to the law is we got to get out of the churchianity mindset and understand that and so if you don't get anything else, get these main points here for the Mosaic Law. Number one, Mosaic Law to unbelieving Israel. If you're a believer, you're not under the law, you're under grace. Now, of course, with Israel, they don't actually get the atonement till the second coming, so they remain under the law until Jesus' second coming. But for us, if you're a believer, you're not under any law as far as God is concerned. Now, of course, don't tell a cop that when you go 100 miles an hour. I'm not under the law. You can't give me a ticket. But as far as God is concerned, spiritually speaking, God's not going to judge us by the law. He judges us by grace. The problem with Israel was that they were in unbelief. God promised, He said, I'll give you the kingdom. You go right into the promised land. I'll give you that land. I will be your God, you'll be my people, and you just go right in and possess that land. But they were in unbelief. And so because of their unbelief, God gave them the law. The law is your schoolmaster to bring you under Christ that you might be justified by faith. So right away we know, number one, today, we're not Israel, we're Gentiles. Number two, we're believers, we're not unbelievers. So the Mosaic Law isn't to you today. And the number two thing to understand is when you try to understand the law, Mosaic Law, understand that this is God as Israel's king giving the national law. It was a different type of government. It was a theocracy. God was the one over Israel as their king, and He's giving the laws for their society. When we see today, we've got laws for our society, and it's not God giving them, it's the president or the Congress or Supreme Court or whoever's in charge of the nation. They're the ones who gives us the law. And God was the one in charge of the nation. He's the one who, He says in Exodus 4, when He brought them out of Egypt, He said, Israel is my firstborn. He says, and they're my firstborn, they're my nation. Sure, they're in unbelief, but they're my people. So I'm going to give them laws. Whereas, so they've got, so it's the Mosaic Law is to Israel as unbelievers, and it's a national law. Today, we have national laws, like if you're in the U.S., you've got whatever Congress and, the president passes and with Supreme Court rules on, and you got state laws and county laws and city laws and all these laws. It has nothing to do with spiritual things. And that's another point to remember, is that because God is Israel's king and He gives the national laws are for Israel's spiritual good. Whereas today, you say, okay, we are believers in the body of Christ. We're not under the law, we're under grace, we're not Israel. But even if we weren't believers, we still wouldn't be under this Mosaic Law, because that's God as Israel's king giving the national laws. And these laws are given, our laws are mainly given to provide safety, to keep society running so that people aren't killing each other and robbing banks and doing all these bad criminal stuff. So you have laws to keep the peace in society, and you have laws to keep the economy going. A lot of things are centered around money. A lot of laws are based upon that. So we lock up the criminals, we make sure so the society is safe, and then we try to create a system by which people can make money and make a living and contribute to society in a materialistic, economic type of way. That's not what God was concerned about. That's why you have laws like every Sabbath day, you rest. Every seventh year, you give the land rest. If you're worried about the economy, you don't do that. You work every single day. You have the land producing crops every single year. You don't take a year off. Then they had the Jubilee year. We talked about that last time, where every 50th year land would go back to whoever originally owned it, and debts would be canceled in Israel. You don't have that. I mean, Biden said he's been trying to cancel student loans, and there's all this going back and forth. And people say, that's not fair. I paid 20 years to pay off my student loan, and you're going to cancel this bum's law loan? He didn't pay anything? It's not fair. See, it's all based on money and economy and keeping the peace in society today. But that's not, God isn't concerned about the economic well-being of Israel, because he knows even if they do well and have the highest gross domestic product of any nation, it's still, when they die, they don't have it. So God is not concerned with their economic good. He's concerned with the spiritual good. So when you keep these three things in mind, hopefully it helps you understand what we're looking at. So we already covered, I think I had 5 sections. We already covered the first section on the priest and the tabernacles. A large part of the laws, because God is concerned with their spiritual good, have to do with who can be the priest, what the priests do, what the tabernacle is like, what they've got in there, how God meets with them. And then the sin problem was addressed with animal sacrifices and feasts and different things like that. And that's a large majority of the law, and we've already covered that. Last time we covered some of the weird laws, and they're weird because, again, God's focus isn't the economic good of Israel and producing a great economy and keeping the peace. He's really concerned with their spiritual good. So it's basically a theocracy as opposed to a democracy or a republic or a monarchy or dictatorship. It's really God concerned with their spiritual well-being, not economic and keeping the peace. So it's different focuses. The problem with churchianity is they look at it, they don't understand these things. They think, well, they don't rightly divide the word of truth, so they think, well, these are laws for us. And so then they'll promote the 10 Commandments in Exodus 20 and say you got to follow those. But then you get to like the weird laws we mentioned last time, and they just sort of throw those out, which you can't do that. I mean, I can't do that in the U.S. I can't say, well, I like this set of laws here. I've made a list, and on this side, here's the laws I want to follow, and on this other side, here are the laws I don't want to follow. So I'm just going to follow these and not follow the ones over there, and everything's fine. See, that's not going to work. I could show the cop arrest me because I broke the law. I say, well, you don't understand, officer. Here's my list. I'm following these laws over here. These other ones, I decided they're not for me. They're not for me today. They're outdated. They're antiquated. So I'm not going to follow those. See, that's not going to work with the cop. It's not going to work with the court of law. I can't pick and choose which laws I want to follow. But because churchianity doesn't understand this, they'll look at that and say, well, 10 Commandments make sense. Don't want to kill, don't want to steal, don't want to commit adultery. Okay, that's good. But then we get to the weird laws like don't get a round haircut, or a dwarf can't be a priest, or you got to wear a blue ribbon on your garments, or don't boil a kid goat in its mother's milk. Well, we won't follow those because they don't make sense. You're not God. You don't have the ability to choose which ones you're going to follow and which ones you can't. And the reality is the laws are for unbelievers and for Israel, and we're believers and we're Gentiles. So it's a different dispensation, a different group of people within the dispensation, believers versus unbelievers, and we are operating by a higher law, the law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus. So with that in mind, those 3 things, hopefully that helps us understand what's going on here. So we've covered the tabernacle and priest laws, the sacrifice laws, the feasts. We've covered the weird laws. And so today I'm hoping to cover the social laws and the criminal laws. And the other section I've got is rules with dealing with God. So the social laws I wrote, and these are just approximations of the 114 chapters from Exodus 20 to Deuteronomy 34. About 13 of those chapters deal with social laws. So you're looking at about 11% of them. And really, a lot of these social laws, for us it's about, well, we have social laws so that people are treated fairly and You don't have, you can have peace. You don't have to worry about somebody committing a crime against you. But again, God's concerned with their spiritual well-being. So social laws, the focus of these social laws is to show there is unholy versus holy. God said to Israel, "Be ye holy, for I am holy." And so he makes these social laws so you get an understanding. He looks, because they're walking by sight and not by faith, because they're unbelievers. So he says, okay, I'm going to create, you need to understand, I'm God and I'm holy. You're man, you're not holy. And so what you need to do is trust in me, and I can give you my righteousness, and then you can be holy. But because they're walking by sight, they're comparing themselves among everybody else. They think, well, we're holy already because God has set us apart from the other nations, and so God's just going to save us. But that's what the Pharisees thought. The Pharisees taught in Jesus' day that if I go to the temple and I do what the Pharisees tell me to do, I'm already basically born into the kingdom by being a Jew. And as long as the Pharisees don't excommunicate me out of their religion, then I'm going to have life in the kingdom. It's like they've got this birthright to eternal life. That's what the religion taught. And so what God does is saying, no, it's nothing to do with that. You don't say, because you're special because I gave you the law, therefore you're holy. God's saying, I am holy. If you are going to be in my kingdom, you've got to meet my holy standard. Not better than anybody else. You've got to meet my perfect holy standard. And to show them the difference, then God creates social laws so they can see the difference between unholy and holy. So, example, Leviticus 11. Leviticus chapter 11. Leviticus chapter 11, he says in verse 2, the Lord says to Moses, "Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, These are the beasts which ye shall eat among all the beasts that are on the earth. Whatsoever parteth the hoof, and is cloven-footed, and cheweth cud, among the beasts, that shall ye eat. Nevertheless, these shall ye not eat of them that chew the cud, or of them that divide the hoof, as the camel, because he cheweth the cud, but divideth not the hoof, but is unclean unto you. And the coney, or the rabbit, because he cheweth the cud, but divideth not the hoof, he is unclean unto you. And the hare, because he cheweth the cud, but divideth not the hoof, he is unclean unto you. And the swine, though he divide the hoof, and he be cloven-footed, yet he cheweth not the cud, he is unclean to you." So you've got, and he keeps going on from there, but you got certain animals that are clean. So Leviticus 11, you got clean versus unclean animals. So why is it that a Jew could eat a hamburger, but they couldn't eat a slice of ham or a piece of bacon? Well, God says the swine or the pig is unclean and the cow is clean based on these rules. But why is that? I don't know. I mean, God must have a reason for it, picking certain animals that are clean or certain unclean. But the main thing to understand is the reason he did it. Is if you understand certain animals are clean, certain animals are unclean, is to show you that if you're going to be holy, then you got to eat the clean and not the unclean. But then, of course, if you're holy, if you do that, you're only going to be holy in the flesh. It has nothing to do with your soul or your spirit, except the fact that God made it a commandment. But that would be, it's a fleshly thing. It's what I'm eating. It's of the flesh. My soul doesn't eat it. It's my flesh that eats it. And so he's trying to give them a visual illustration, since they're walking by sight, and saying certain things are clean, certain things are unclean, those animals. When you get, for example, to Peter and Cornelius in Acts chapter 10, he has that sheet of meat come down, and he says, "Arise, Peter, eat." Peter says, "I've never eaten anything that's unclean." And then he said, God says, "What I have called clean, don't you call unclean." And he recognizes that what he's doing is it's not really that the pig is unclean and there's something wrong with eating the piece of bacon. But he's trying to say, there's been a dispensational change here, and now I'm having Paul, who's just called just beforehand, and you just met with him for 15 days, you learned this stuff from him for 15 days, you abode with him, or he abode with you, you learned that dispensation of grace has started, and now the gospel of grace has started, the mystery gospel, and it's primarily going to Gentiles. And even when you read Acts 10 and 11, you'll find out that Peter understands that that sheet of meat, clean versus unclean, represents Jews and Gentiles. So it's not that the pig is worse than the cow, although I'm sure God has a reason why he picked it like that. I don't know. But the point is there is holy and unholy. And so if they recognize they need to be, if they eat just the clean animals, then they're holy in that respect. So then they understand, well, I've got to follow all of the law to be holy for God, because God says, be ye holy, for I am holy. And so I need to follow all the law. And of course I can't do it. So then you learn the lesson that you can't follow all the law. And so then you trust in God to save you. So that's the purpose of these social laws. It's not to create a list of things. Because you look at, for example, John the Baptist. He ate locust and wild honey. To me it seems like a locust was a clean animal. But if you ask me, what I consider clean? I consider a pig and the meat of a pig to be more clean than eating a locust. To me, that's what in my mind, that's what I'm thinking. But God says that's not the case. A locust is clean, but the pig is not. So it's just God, and whether he did it arbitrarily or not, I don't know. But the point is, God makes a difference between clean and unclean, so that you understand there's a difference between unholy and holy. So then God, with these social laws, tries to get them to follow the holy. And of course, they're not going to obey it perfectly. So then if they don't obey it perfectly, then they know the only way they're going to be holy is for God to save them. So it's all about just teaching them the lesson to trust in God to save them, instead of their religion, their pagan, other gods, and trying to obey the law. Leviticus 13 and 14. If you ever have trouble sleeping at night, you might want to read Leviticus 13. It's you got 59 verses there, and it's all about plagues in the skins, leprosy. And then you can even have leprosy in the clothing. You can even have leprosy in a house. And it goes into detail of how a priest will examine a house and determine if it's got leprosy and it's clean, it's unclean, or if it doesn't and it's clean now. Again, just showing the difference between holy and unholy there. Leviticus 15 talks about uncleanness as far as issues from your body, fluid and blood that comes out of your body. What makes somebody clean or unclean based upon how long you're unclean, and the rules related to that. Leviticus 21 and 22 is all about keeping the flesh holy before the Lord. And, talks about different people and everything. About how, for example, verse 10, Leviticus 21:10, he that is the high priest among his brethren, upon whose head the anointing oil was poured, and that is consecrated to put on the garments, shall not uncover his head, nor rend his clothes. Neither shall he go into any dead body, nor defile himself for his father or for his mother. So you can't even go to your own father's funeral. If you do, you're going to be unclean, and you can't do your priestly duties for a certain time. Neither shall he go out of the sanctuary, nor profane the sanctuary of his God, for the crown of the anointing oil of his God is upon him. I am the Lord. And so you got all these rules about holy versus unholy. And it's all about, again, you look at it and you say, in a normal society, say the United States, we're not going to make rules about this stuff. What animals can you eat? What can't you eat? When is a garment have leprosy in it, and when doesn't it? When does a house have leprosy? When it can be considered clean? Laws about how you're unclean with an issue of blood or some fluid that comes from your body, or what about a priest and you can't go to a funeral. We don't have any rules about that, about a priest not being around a dead body. You got all these. because what does this have to do with a nation and society? It has nothing to do with the economy. So we don't have any rules like this in the United States. But remember, God is Israel's king, and the laws aren't for the economic good, it's for Israel's spiritual good. So he creates all of these laws that maybe seem arbitrary, and who knows, maybe some of this stuff is. You know, God may not have a reason behind certain things being clean or certain things being unclean. I don't know. Maybe he does. But the point is, he's just trying to make a distinction to say there's unholy versus holy. And I've told you, Israel, to be holy because I am holy. And so when you try to follow all these laws, and they're, like I said, there's so many of them. I mean, Leviticus 13 had 59 verses. Leviticus 14, still talking about leprosy, has 57 verses. I mean, right there you've got 116 verses talking about leprosy and houses and garments and people and all this. And it's really, there's a lot of detail here. That's why being a priest was a full-time job. Jesus a couple of times calls them lawyers. It's basically, you can think of these priests not as somebody like today that would study God's Word and give a message. You can think of them as you would a lawyer, where you got to know all this stuff and know every single situation and everything. And you're not going to do it perfectly. And there's always going to be, you know, some gray areas. Because the law is black and white. You know how that is. You have somebody arrested for something, and the law says they're guilty. Well, then the lawyer for the defense says, well, no, you didn't understand because there was this extenuating circumstance here. And so then that meant, yeah, I know he did that, but because of this A, B, C, and D, then he's not really guilty. You know, you got the law is black and white, but you got all these gray areas. So you got pages and pages of what's clean and unclean and all that, but at the same time, not everything is going to neatly fall into these categories. So how do you deal with it? You know, and so you've got, you know, lawyers and judges, like in our court system. They do the best that they can, but you know the judgments from the judge are not going to be perfect. The lawyers are not going to follow the laws perfectly. And so God gives all these details of these laws, knowing that everything is not black and white, so that they'll understand, you know, hey, I've tried my best, the priest would say, to follow all these chapters, and I've memorized it all, but I know I didn't do it perfectly. And they'll say, there you go. I told you to be holy because I am holy, and you gave it your best shot. You're the brightest lawyer in Israel. You gave it your best shot, and you still didn't do it perfectly. So what does that teach you? You can't be self-righteous. Isaiah 64:6 is the lesson for them to learn. All your righteousnesses, Israel's righteousnesses, are as filthy rags. That right there is the lesson to learn from the social laws. Because no matter how hard I try to be holy and apply all this stuff, I'm not going to do it perfectly. So if I am trying to meet God with my own righteousness, God says it's filthy rags. I told you to be holy, have that white garment, walk in white, the fine, clean linen as the righteousness of the saints in Revelation. Wear that fine, clean linen garment, spiritually speaking. No matter how hard you try, your own righteousness are as filthy rags. You don't have the fine, clean white linen, the white robes. Who gets the white robes? It's God who gives the bride of Christ, Israel in Revelation, the white robes. They didn't earn it. Their righteousnesses are as filthy rags. So when God gives them all these laws and says, this is holy, this is unholy, then it gives them the picture to understand, the laws are schoolmaster, to say, I can't do it. No matter how hard I try. I know I didn't give perfect judgment. I know I didn't obey the law perfectly. I know somewhere, somehow, I ate an unclean animal. Maybe not intentionally, I didn't know it, but I did it. And the point is, you can't follow all that. You just learned the lesson. You learned your righteousnesses are as filthy rags, and you need to go to God to get salvation. So that's the whole purpose of these social laws. And let's see, Deuteronomy 22 is one that I highlighted. Another thing to understand about these books is that the laws are in Exodus and then and Leviticus too. Basically, the normal laws are in Exodus, then the Leviticus laws, the Levitical priest laws are in Leviticus. And then you get to Deuteronomy. Deuto means two. It's the second telling of it. What it is Israel was, due to their unbelief, they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. That generation of unbelievers died off, and their children then went into the promised land. And within a year of them going in, and a year of Moses dying, because Moses will die before he gets into the promised land, Deuteronomy is written to tell that new generation. And so it's a second telling of the law. So you'll see a lot of things in Deuteronomy that you'll see in Exodus and Leviticus, but there's more details in Deuteronomy because now they're going to go into the land. So there's going to be more laws there. You know, you need more, if you've got a nation, you need more laws for a nation that's actually in a land where you're going to have houses and everything. You're going to dwell there and build a life for yourself there, as opposed to if you're just a group of nomads running around in the wilderness going in circles for 40 years. So you need more laws for that other society, and the other society is going to grow too. They'll have births, and more births than deaths, and they'll grow as a nation. Deuteronomy 22 then, you can see just various laws. I think we went over some of these, like verse 6, Deuteronomy 22 verse 6. We went over how if you find a bird's nest, that was one of the weird laws. You can take the eggs of the bird, but you can't take the mother bird, and you got to shoo the mother bird away, and you take the eggs. They got different laws that just seem weird, but it's all about, they seem weird because, again, God is trying to make unholy versus holy, clean versus unclean, so they understand that they're not righteous before God. By the way, if you ever wondered, that verse in verse 5 sometimes is used to try to go against transgenders. Deuteronomy 22:5, the woman shall not wear that which pertaineth unto a man, neither shall a man put on a woman's garment, for all that do so are abomination unto the Lord thy God. The reason transgenderism is a sin isn't because you're wearing the wrong clothes. It's because God made you a man and you say you're a woman, or God made you a woman and you say you're a man. You're defying God who made you. That's what makes it a sin. It's not because a man wore a dress. That's just an outward manifestation of the sin. Jesus said in Mark 7 that sin comes from within. But because this is a national covenant and it's carnal ordinances, it's fleshly. So you don't hear this talking about, well, it's because you're defying who God made you. They're looking on the outward appearance because this is a fleshly covenant. So people looking for a law in the Bible to say transgenderism is a sin pulls out Deuteronomy 22:5, which has nothing to do with us because we're not Israel and we're believers. But again, transgenderism is a sin not because a man put on a dress, but because he's defying what God said. Again, they'll bring up Deuteronomy 22:5, but they're not going to bring up verse 6 and tell you, well, you shouldn't have taken those. You took the eggs and the mother to both at the same time. That's a sin. No one's bringing that up. That's the verse after it. They just bring up verse 5 because they want something to substantiate what they're doing and they don't understand what's going on. Okay, so that was social laws. And then the criminal laws is basically the whole purpose behind the criminal laws. And it looks like there are only 7 chapters or 6% of the law. Not a whole lot to do with that because, again, God's not really, our society, we have a lot of criminal laws because we're concerned about people being treated fairly. People, you can't steal from people. You got to have people fair treatment and you have all this. But although God is, certainly He says don't steal and He has those laws, primarily He is concerned with their spiritual good, not their economic good. And so, so he doesn't spend so much time on the criminal things. For example, we have laws that seem to be fair. And last time in our weird law section, we mentioned that the Bible says that a dwarf cannot be a priest, or somebody with a broken foot or a broken hand can't be a priest. And today we think that's unfair. We got Americans with Disabilities Act, and you got to have reasonable accommodations for people so that they can do those jobs. And you can't call them a dwarf because that's politically incorrect. We're all about fairness and sounding good and making sure everybody, but God's not worried about that. God's worried about Israel's spiritual good. So yes, there are criminal laws, and you can't steal from somebody, and he's concerned about that. But the main thing he's concerned about is their spiritual good. So that's why the vast majority of the law has to do with priests, who are the priests, what they do, the tabernacle, what's in the tabernacle, what you do with that, animal sacrifices, feasts. You got all these laws centered around the religious system of Israel, because he's concerned with God is making a religion to get them to understand that they are sinners and that they need God to save them. That's what it's all about. So whether okay, let's say you're a dwarf and you can't offer bread to the Lord, you can't be a priest. That's unfair. It's not your fault. You're born, foot and a half shorter than most people. It's not your fault. But really, in the scheme of things, it doesn't matter, because in eternity, if you've trusted in God to save you rather than your own righteousnesses or your own religion or just doing it bad stuff, but you trust in God to save you, then you're going to have eternal life in the kingdom. And you don't have to worry about being a dwarf. That's not going to be, you won't have that. Any abnormalities as a result of the curse of sin being upon us, they all go away. You have a glorified body. So yeah, it's unfair that you, even though you're born a Levite, just because you're a foot and a half taller than the other Levite, shorter than the other Levites, you can't offer bread to the Lord. You can't be a priest. Sure, that's unfair, but what's the unfairness last? 30 years, 40 years? In eternity, if you trust in God to save you, you don't have to worry about that. You got a glorified body. You're not going to be a foot and a half shorter than everybody else. And you can bring glory to God for all eternity. But if you don't believe in God, you follow your own righteousness, you follow your own way, then you spend eternity in hell. So it's a lot better that God says the dwarf can't offer bread as a priest, and as a result of that, he trusts in God to save him, and he has eternal life in the kingdom, as opposed to him being born a normal height and don't trust in God and trust in he's got pride in what he's doing, and so then he ends up in hell as a result. So a lot of times we look at things and say, well, it's unfair. I can tell you, Lana, she had things happen to her as a child that should not have happened to anybody. It's not her fault. It's just circumstances that was around her and things that happened to her that she couldn't prevent as a kid. I think the adults did things to her that they shouldn't have done. Not her fault. She's got, she had issues with that all her life because, that's hard to get away from. But it's not something to worry about, because now that she's in heaven, she don't have any of those problems. Vile flesh is gone. Any scars related to what happened to her, gone. She's in the presence of the Lord. She doesn't have a glorified body yet, but she will at the rapture. And she's got in God's love and in His glory, not sinning, and just enjoying the wonderful things there. So it's better that happened to her, and as a result, and I don't know if it was, but as a result, let's say, being saved and going into eternity, as opposed to worrying about what's going on in this life. But see, most people in our society, we're so worried about fairness. Oh, it's not right that this person had this happen to them, or they were born with this condition, or they've got this ailment. Well, yeah, it's not right, but who said this life is fair? Satan is the god of this world. We're under the curse of sin. The world is operating by the course of this world. Why would you expect everybody to be treated fairly? You think Satan is concerned about people being treated fairly? Of course not. So why would you expect that to happen? You get into eternity, it does. So our society is concerned about, oh yeah, you can't prevent a dwarf from being a priest, and you can't even call him a dwarf, and you got to help him out. Whereas God said, no, he can't be a priest, because I'm not really concerned about what happens in this life. I'm concerned about his spiritual good. And maybe that ailment, or what happened to Lana, or things that happen in life that we consider bad, really ends up for your good. I know, for example, at the end of the book of Genesis, and this is really the theme of the book of Genesis, if I can find it, you've got Joseph, and you know what they did to him is his brothers sold him into slavery, and now Joseph, though, ends up being the ruler in Egypt and helping them all out there. And of course they come to him and they say, we're sorry that we did that to you, and we treated you bad and we shouldn't have done that. I'm thinking Genesis 47, but I'm not seeing it right off the bat. Maybe it's a little earlier here. Maybe it's chapter 45. So they're basically sorry for what they did after they realized that he's the ruler now. Boy, it looks like it's right in here, but I'm not seeing it. But anyway, there's a verse in there where he says, what you meant for bad, God meant for good. And so, yeah, you tried to do bad things against me, and you tried to, sell me into slavery. You were jealous of me. You didn't like me. And you did this evil to me. But don't worry about it, because God turned it out for the good. It's going to bug me now that I can't find this verse.
Is it Genesis 50:20?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I didn't go that far. Thanks, Lisa. Genesis 50, verse 20. Yeah. Joseph said, as for you, ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass, as it is this day, to save much people alive. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Lisa. That's the theme verse of Genesis. I should have it highlighted or something, and I don't. What you meant for evil, God meant for good. So, there's a lot of bad things that happen to people that they don't deserve. I wish I could grab that highlighter from you, Benoit. That would be great. Now I'm going to just write in here, theme verse with my pen. There. And so you say, well, that's not fair that this stuff happened to you. It's right, it's not fair. But God looks at it from an eternal standpoint. He looks at it from a spiritual. And any unfairness that you have in this life as a result of things happening to you, because we're under the curse of sin and Satan is the god of this world, in the end, it won't matter, because in eternity, you can allow those things like Joseph did, or like many examples of people saying, as a result of this, I'm going to not focus on what's right and what's fair and trying to get good in this life, but I'm going to focus in, I'm a sinner, and that for us today, Jesus died for our sins, buried and rose again, and now I'm going to set my affection on things above, not on things of the earth. And so then, my focus is completely on the spiritual, and those are things that are going to last eternal. Instead of focusing on what's in this life and what's fair and making sure I get my fair share of this and people don't mistreat me, when I do that, I'm focusing on the material world that's going to pass away. But if I'm unfairly treated, maybe I'll look at it from a spiritual perspective, and now I have life. And so you'll see that God, and that's why God doesn't really spend a whole lot of time on these criminal laws. And when he does, there is a lot of bad punishments too. Because a lot of times, again, we're thinking of unfairness, being fair. And I always think it's funny that a lot of people are just dead set against the death penalty. And you got people who, you could be a mass murderer, just the awful, worst person, and they're sentenced to death, and it comes time for their execution, And there's going to be a whole bunch of people out there picketing and saying, it's unfair. You shouldn't send him to the gas chamber or the electric chair or whatever it is. You shouldn't be killing somebody. Well, you know, he shouldn't have killed those 20 people that he killed. You know, that was unfair too. But you're trying to defend this guy's life. You know, God's not concerned about that stuff. In fact, he gives a lot of times with these criminal things, the punishments are very severe. Look over in Leviticus chapter 20. We won't go into all the details of the criminal laws here. He doesn't spend a lot of time on it because he's focused on the spiritual, not the physical. But look over in Leviticus 20, you can see a lot of these things that you see, you would think, well, that's unfair. Sure, they broke the law. Sure, they should be punished, but not that severely, is what people think. Verse 9, Leviticus 20, verse 9. Everyone that curseth his father or his mother shall be surely put to death. He hath cursed his father or his mother, his blood shall be upon him. You got kids today that, born a boy, say they want to be a girl. The parents try to stop them, and the parents get arrested for trying to stop the boy from being a girl. And basically, if the parents say, God made you a boy, and you're supposed to say a boy, according to Leviticus 20, verse 9, if we're under this national law, and you try to go against them by trying to become a girl, you are to be put to death for that. And in this society, it's the parents that get arrested. Verse 10, the man that committeth adultery with another man's wife, even he that committeth adultery with his neighbor's wife, the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death. The man that lieth with his father's wife hath uncovered his father's nakedness. Both of them shall surely be put to death. Their blood shall be upon them. What does Paul say? 1 Corinthians 5. There's a situation like that. A man is lying with his father's wife. Paul doesn't say, well, the Bible says you need to go kill that man and the woman that he's with. Their blood is going to be upon him. He said, no, we're not under the law. We're under grace. And grace says, I'm concerned with your spiritual good, and so you just kick him out of the church. And then maybe he'll repent of it. He'll see, after losing fellowship with the body of Christ, he'll see his sin, and as a result then, maybe he will come back, believe the gospel if he wasn't a believer, or if he was a believer, stop that sin so that he can be edified in the knowledge of the truth. But God says, because he's not dealing with believers, he's dealing with unbelievers. You know, it's a good, if you got these sins here, they may not seem like a big deal as far as, well, you cursed your father or mother, you shouldn't do that, but are you really going to kill him for that? Or, yeah, you shouldn't commit adultery with another man's wife, but now you're going to kill both people? Seems a little extreme. Well, God says a little leaven, leaveneth the whole lump. And if you're under the law, all you've got is your vile flesh. In your flesh dwelleth no good thing. You're not believers, so you don't have life in, being a believer. So all you got is your vile flesh, and there's not going to be any good thing that comes out of it. So God has to make extreme punishments to keep you from doing this. I tell you, if this law of committing adultery with another man's wife, and both are to be put to death, if that was on the books in the United States of America, and it was followed, I guarantee you there would be a lot less adultery in America than there is today. Because, if the penalty is death, you're going to think twice about doing that, And so when you're dealing with the vile flesh, you got to try to, and he's got to try to keep that nation from getting out of hand. He wants them to believe, to recognize their own righteousnesses are as filthy rags, so that they'll understand that, trusting God to save them. But at the same time, God knows there's only going to be a believing remnant. And to keep the nation from killing themselves, he's got to try to have these extreme punishments for these criminal laws in order to keep the society going and keep that sin from ruining it. I've noticed in society today, it's a lot harder to get the gospel to people, get sound doctrine from God's word, right division, sound doctrine from Paul's epistles to believers today than it was, say, 40, 50 years ago. And it's because our society as a whole is given more over to the lust of the flesh and not listening to the spiritual things. And so as society gravitates toward more of the flesh and less of the Spirit as a whole, then you're less likely to have people saved and come into the knowledge of the truth. You see that culminated in Sodom and Gomorrah. They're fully given over to the lust of the flesh, and that all they're concerned about is temporary sexual pleasures. So they see these two angels come to Lot's house and say, hey, bring those out. We're going to have sex with them. And who are you to try to stop us? So we're going to kill you if you try to stop us. That's where it gets to if you don't have any check against the sin in a society that is unbelievers. So the punishment seems severe. I mean, all I did was curse my father or mother. Sure, I should be punished for that, but you're going to kill me for that? I had committed adultery. You're going to kill both people for that? I mean, what about the man that lieth with his father's wife? What about his father? I mean, he loses his son and his wife in this situation. Both are killed. Seems kind of unfair to him, right? But you got to do these extreme measures in a society that's unbelievers to keep that sin from spreading and taking over to the point where people won't believe the gospel, they won't get saved, they won't listen to God. But in the Corinthian society, because this is a church and they're saved, they don't go back to Leviticus and say, Paul doesn't say, well, Leviticus 20 verse 11 says, kill that man and the woman he's with. I mean, that's Bible, it says that. No, that's for unbelieving Israel. And this is a church of believers. This isn't laws governing a church. This is governing a nation. And so, under grace, you should have the spiritual maturity to recognize how bad this sin is and how it affects your walk with Christ. And so you kick him out so he recognizes that, and then maybe he'll come back and not do that sin anymore. He has the opportunity to be corrected as an adult through Christ in him. But in an unbelieving society and nation of Israel, to keep the society from getting like Sodom and Gomorrah and destroying themselves, there are extreme punishments for these things to keep sin away so that the society as a whole will still, like I said, 50 years ago, you're much more likely to get somebody you present the gospel to, much more likely for them to believe it, much more likely for them to be saved. I know when Lana was saved 30 years ago, I guess it was, she had a shirt of Jesus on a cross. He loved you this much. And she loved that shirt. She wore it all the time in Alabama. She got all kinds of compliments. People say, oh, I love your shirt. You know, it's an opportunity to talk about Christ with other people. Well, then, she wore it so much, she wore it out. And then we moved back to Alabama after we got married. And it was, well, probably about 10 years ago now. I bought her another shirt just like that. She's wearing it in Alabama. But now it is, 20 years later. She's got people, not only do people not say, I don't like your shirt, I like your shirt, then not only are they not saying that, people have look at disgust you wearing that. We had our, when you had to wear a COVID mask, we got a mask that had Jesus, a cross on there. It said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I got people saying, being upset with me for wearing a Bible verse on a mask. And I'm in the Bible Belt in Alabama. It's a lot harder to share the gospel and to share sound doctrine and right division in the same society today, same location, as it was 30 years ago, because the society as a whole is more given over to wicked and evilness. So if we stop the sins to getting extreme, stopping these sexual sins by killing the people, stop them from being disobedient to parents and killing those people, well then we keep the sin at bay, and now there's a better opportunity for people to understand, I'm a sinner and I need to trust in God to save me. When you have the consequences, the severe consequences for your sin. You know, it's interesting that in Romans 1, you've got a list. Romans 1 gives you a list, was it verse 29 through... Romans 1, 29 through 31. It gives you a list of those with evil, reprobate minds. This is a list. They're filled with all unrighteousness. And it gives you a list of all these things that all these evil people do. And then you got a list over in 2 Timothy 3. And this list, and we won't go through it all because that's not the point of the message, but tonight anyway. But 2 Timothy 3 verses 2 through 5. 2 Timothy 3, 2 through 5 gives you a list of what the people with a form of godliness do. Those with the form of godliness. So these are the people up here in Romans 1 that are following human evil. And then the people over in 2 Timothy 3 are following human good. And so you'll see a lot of pride issues in the 2 Timothy 3 verses, because that's human good, form of godliness. In Romans 1, you'll see a lot of wickedness like murder and debate and strife and adultery, fornication. You'll see that type of stuff. But you know what's in both lists? Both lists have disobedient to parents. And you say, well, that doesn't sound too bad. What's the big deal? Well, God says if you curse father or mother, your blood is upon you. You should be killed for that. You know what's bad about disobedient to parents, and we're going to see it when we get over to Deuteronomy, when we get over to the 5 cycles of chastisement, which is what we're going to cover after we finish this overview of the Mosaic Law, is the problem with the disobedient to parents is the parents are the ones who train up the children. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. The way he should go is Jesus, because Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And a lot of times what parents do is parents know the mistakes they've made. They know what they should have done, but they didn't do it perfectly. And they want something better for their kids. I remember going to church as a kid. There were a couple kids that would be at Sunday school. Their parents weren't there. The parents wanted the kids to be in church, but the parents wouldn't go to church. So they dropped the kids off at church. It's a lot of times it's, as a parent, you're trying to get what's best for the children. And so you're more likely to give them good godly counsel, or at least good morals, even if you're an unbeliever. The issue with disobedient to parents is the generations get worse and worse and worse. See, if I obey what my parents say, at least I have good morals. And then I give them to my kids, they have good morals. But if you're disobedient to parents, the human evil and the human good side shows up. And the next generation gets worse than the generation before it. And the next generation gets worse than the one before it. That's why our generation right now is so bad. Because the parents haven't had time to raise up the kids. They don't spend the time with them. And so then the kids get unruly. And when we leave the school system to train them up, they're more of a parent to the kids than most parents are, because the parents don't have time. They're all working they're both working and they're trying to meet their bills. And so then the teachers at the schools spend more time and are like parents to the kids. And what are our kids being taught? Cancel culture, woke, transgenderism, change your own gender. Is that the values that we really want to give to our kids? So the generations get worse and worse and worse. And that's why that's a big deal. So you think, what's the big deal? You curse father or mother. What you're doing is you're just making it worse and worse to the point where it's unsavable. And that's why the rapture, I think, will be pretty soon, because where do you see a generation that's obeying their parents? Anywhere in the world. But you can see there's these extreme measures here. A lot of these things worthy of death that we'd say, well, that's too harsh. Well, you got to get rid of the sin. If you don't nip it in the bud, as Barney Fife said, then it gets worse. And then how are you going to present the gospel? How are people going to listen to the gospel and get sound doctrine in the inner man? That shirt was a great witness 30 years ago that Lana wore. 10 years ago, people didn't want to see it. They didn't want to hear it. Same state, same Bible Belt and all that. That the society has changed. So you got to nip this sin in the bud. So that's why he has these such extreme punishments for breaking laws. And a lot of these are sexual laws, and they end up you are to put to death, and at least in Leviticus 20 here. So anyway, there's just 7 chapters that I identified as criminal laws. But again, God isn't really concerned with this stuff, because He's concerned with their spiritual good. So it's all about making sure they're holy. They've got the tabernacle. They have the priests. They have the sacrifices. And they're focusing toward God. And then when it comes to certain things that would really make a society get so bad that they wouldn't even listen to the gospel, they wouldn't even get sound doctrine in the inner man, then God nips it in the bud with, you curse father and mother, you're out of here. You're to be killed. You lie with another man's wife, we're killing both of you. Yeah, it seems extreme, but we got to get rid of that sin. There's a lot less. I bet they didn't have, if you enforce Leviticus 20 and verse 9, cursing father and mother, you're to be killed. I bet you don't have any kids there trying to change their own gender in that society. It's not going to happen. So, yeah, it's extreme measures. And you say, well, that's not fair that they got killed at an early stage in life. Well, again, who cares about this life? It's the life to come that's important. So if God creates criminal laws that will keep sin at bay to where it doesn't get too extreme, so that people can hear that they are unrighteous, their own righteousnesses are as filthy rags, and that they need to trust in God to save them, and that message is allowed to be presented, and people have the ears to hear that. You know, Paul says over here in, was it 2 Timothy 4? 2 Timothy 4 verse 3, 2 Timothy 4:3, the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lust shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears, and they shall turn away their ears from the truth, and shall be turned unto fables. Why? Because they're given over to the lust of their flesh and their sins more. But if you've got national laws that have extreme punishments for these sins, like adultery or cursing your own father or mother, then that keeps these lists here, the evil, human evil, and the human good, from overtaking things. You've got a form of discipline. You've got a conscience. You understand that you're a sinner. And so then you'll want to hear the gospel. You'll want to hear the solution to your sin problem. You'll want to hear sound doctrine once you're saved so you can have Christ live in you. But if you're just so consumed with your own lust and following those, and there's no punishments in the national realm for those things, then you'll just get worse and worse as a society. And now, who's going to listen to right division? Who's going to listen to the gospel? I mean, people at work know I'm a Christian, and I mean, they probably don't know all the videos and everything, but I can't go in there at a government office and just start preaching the gospel to people, because separation of church and state. I can't have, right now, I could probably do a Bible study, you know, outside of work with people if they're interested, but I can't go in there and just start teaching a Bible study during lunchtime. Separation of church and state. They don't allow that in society. And all, you know, fairness to all religions, because you may be offended by that message. Well, you know, guess what? Everybody who is your flesh, everybody's flesh is offended by the gospel and sound doctrine. So if I go in there and preach a clear gospel and sound doctrine, there are going to be people offended, guaranteed, because your flesh is going to be offended. Who cares about who's offended or not? It's more important that you have life with Christ and that you have Christ live in you. So that's why there's these extreme punishments for criminal things, because it's all about the spiritual good. Not about that I feel good, that I wasn't offended, that you helped, that you were fair, that we promoted the economy. God doesn't care about that stuff. He cares about them having life with Him, that they receive His love, that they stop their own religion and their own righteousnesses, and they just trust in God's provision for them. So that's why there's not so much time on these criminal laws, and when you get them, there are extreme punishments. All right, I think we're going to have time at least to get into this next one. The last section that I have here is rules with God, and you can see that's almost triple the content of the criminal laws. There's what I identified as 17 chapters, or 15% of the law. And the main thing they have to understand there, when it comes to rules with God, is they need to learn with rules with God, the lesson to learn is God is the only God. And because of that, because He is the only God, then he's the one you have to please. He's the one who makes the rules. You know, if I've got at work, I've got one boss. Maybe I don't like what she tells me. Doesn't matter. She's the boss. So if she tells me to do something, you know, provided it's not, you know, criminal or, you know, embezzlement or something like that, but provided it's a good moral decision, it's not against the policies, I need to do it. I may not want to do it. You mean you want me to take all that hard work I did over a year, you want me to scan all that stuff in and the system, and then you want me to box it up and put it in storage? I don't want to do that stuff. Doesn't matter if I want to do it or not. If my boss tells me to do it, I'm supposed to do it. And you say, well, and that's why the rules with God is about God is the only God. When you look at the Ten Commandments, the first one, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Number 2, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image. Number 3, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. Number 4, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. You got 4, the first 4, right away it's number 1, I'm the only God. Therefore, you don't serve any other gods. Number 2, you don't make an image to serve other gods or an image to me. Don't make an image of God and try to bow down to Him. That's why, by the way, what does God look like? What is His physical characteristics? Does He have blonde hair, red hair, brown hair? How tall is He? You know, what skin color is He? There's none of that stuff in the Bible. I don't know what God looks like physically. Because if I knew what God looked like physically, I'd make an image to Him, and I'd bow down to the image. God doesn't want to have any gods before Him, including your image of God. And so He says, don't make an image. Don't bow down to it. I'm not going to tell you what I look like, because if I did, you make an image and you bow down to that, then the image would be your God and I wouldn't be your God. So I'm not going to tell you what I look like. Don't have any gods before me. Don't make any images. If you take on my name, do what you say you're going to do. Don't go against your own word there when you swear by God. And make sure you got one day to keep holy. And that's, again, the Sabbath day. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. That goes back to our social laws. Unholy versus holy. God told Israel, remember they're unbelievers. And they said, all that the Lord has said, we will do. So God says, okay, one day. He says, you got 7 days in a week. The 7th day, Saturday, Sabbath day. He says, Sabbath day, keep it holy. I'm only asking for one day, He says. You keep one day holy. You go to the temple, you do the sacrifices, and we'll have the reading of the law, and all this stuff that we're going to do at the temple. That one day, you don't work, and you come and give it to the Lord. Six days, you can do your job, and you don't have to go to the temple, you don't have to meet with the Lord. I'm just asking one day out of the week to keep holy. That's all you have to do. One day. They couldn't do it. They couldn't be holy for one day. You know, I tried as a kid because I was taught that when you sin, you gotta get saved again. So I could go a day without getting unsaved because there's going to be some bad thought that gets in my mind. And so just to be sure, I better confess it. God says, keep one day out of the week. 6 days, don't worry about it. One day out of the week, keep it holy for me. And they couldn't do it. So what's the point? Is if you can't keep one day holy, how are you going to do everything I told you to do? You can't do it. So you learn the lesson of the law when I say you keep one day holy, and you don't do it. Therefore, you have to trust in God to make you holy. So what are we told today? Colossians 3:12. As members of the body of Christ, it says, you are holy and beloved. What do you mean I'm holy and beloved? I can't even keep one day out of 7 holy. How in the world am I holy? Because I'm beloved because of Christ. My life is in Christ. Christ is holy, therefore I am holy. Christ is beloved, therefore I am beloved. I don't keep one day holy. I can keep all 7 days holy, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, if I let Christ live in me. Christ is my life because He is holy, He is beloved. That's why Colossians 2:16, I think it is. That's why over there in Colossians 2:16, he says, "Let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink, or respect of a holy day, or of new moons, or of the Sabbath days." In other words, don't let anyone judge you because you didn't go to church. That's a big problem with us because, oh, sure, you did Bible study, but you stayed at home and watched the Zoom study. That don't count as far as churchianity is concerned. You didn't go to church. Colossians 2:16 says, don't let anyone judge you because you didn't go to church. Why? Because your holiness isn't based upon the fact that you didn't work on a Saturday, you didn't go to church on the Saturday, you didn't do everything God told you to do on that Saturday. Your holiness is based on who you are in Christ. And because Christ is holy, Colossians 3:12 says you are holy. So, and even if you didn't do the Bible study on Zoom on Sunday and you didn't go to church, you're still holy because of who you are in Christ. But Israel, they've got all these rules with God. God is holy. You got to be holy. He says, give me one day. God says, you got 6 other days. Do what you want, but give me one day where you were holy. And they couldn't do it. So they should learn the lesson. My righteousness is as filthy rags. I couldn't keep one day holy. The other 6, God says, don't worry about. Don't go to temple. I don't have to worry about that. One day out of 7, I couldn't do it. How am I going to be holy when God says to be holy? Because I couldn't do it 1 out of 7. I sure can't do it all 7 days. I got to trust in God to save me instead. That's the point. And today, if you've trusted in Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection as atonement for your sin, you are holy because of who you are in Christ. And don't let any man judge you based on whether you went to church or not. Because you should be judged based on who you are in Christ, not based upon some outward performance. But again, Mosaic law is to unbelieving Israel. So there's a lot of rules with God there. What did I say? 17 chapters, or 15% of the Mosaic law. And the idea of the rules of God is to learn that God is the only God. You know, the second commandment there, don't make any graven images. I think it's funny that the Catholics, what they do is they take that second commandment and they just sort of make it a footnote, and they don't really count it. And then they make the 10th commandment, thou shalt not covet, and they break that into 2. They don't want you to notice that the second commandment is really don't make any graven images, because their whole church is full of graven images. So they don't want you to notice that stuff. So they just sort of put it as a footnote in the first commandment, so you won't notice it. And then they make the 10th one into 2 so that they still have 10 commandments. But you say, you know, the thing about the graven images. Catholics make all these images, and I've seen it in Protestants too. I'd go, when I was pastoring up in central Alabama, I'd go on this country road, 15 miles down there to get to where the church was. I'd pass churches and they'd have maybe a statue of something out in the front as a water fountain, but it's still a graven image out there. And they would have, and you have all these images, and God says in the Old Testament, He says, what are you doing? He says, you take a piece of wood and you bake some bread with it. And then you take that same piece of wood and you make an idol out of it and you bow down to it. How is that wood your God? You're the one who made the idol. You're the one who used it to make the bread. You got to be a moron to think that a graven image or an idol is a God, because you are greater than that. It's a piece of wood, piece of stone, whatever it is. It's an inanimate object that has no life in it. You're the one who made life or made it look like something. You're going to bow down to something that you made? You're an idiot. But yet, there's the tendency of that, and the reason they do that. People say, oh, yeah, we're in civilized society, we don't do that anymore. Oh, really? Yeah, I see all those images in the Catholic Church. I see all these superstitions that goes on. But the reason people do that is because, you see, if they recognize, and the reason the rules with God, and what you got to understand is God is the only God. The reason He does that is because if God is the only God, The answer, what you learn is, if He's the only God, God makes the rules. And the thing is, my flesh, because in my flesh dwells no good thing, and God makes rules because He's holy, and He makes it for Israel's spiritual good, those rules that God makes are going to go against their flesh. Even if you make like unclean versus clean animals. You may not have had a thought of eating a piece of bacon, but when your flesh finds out that God says, thou shalt not eat bacon, then your flesh says, hey, I really want a piece of bacon. Because your flesh is so evil that when it has a law, it tries to disobey it. Romans 7 says that. He says, I wouldn't have known sin, except the law says, thou shalt not covet. And sin worked with the commandment and wrought in me all manner of concupiscence, to where I became exceeding sinful. So God makes the laws, and your flesh doesn't like them, because your flesh wants to do what it wants to do. It's not that it suddenly likes bacon when it didn't like it before. It's that I want to make my own rules. So if I got a piece of wood and I make an idol out of it and I bow down to that, that seems pretty stupid. But what it does is, if I've got a graven image and I say there's another God, then if I make the image, then I am the God. See, say I wanted the piece of bacon, right? I go to God and I say, can I have the bacon? Leviticus 11 says, no, you can't. But I want the piece of bacon. You can't have it, God says. But if I make the wooden image or the graven image, I ask my little graven image that I just made, can I have a piece of bacon? I don't hear any objection. I'm going to have the bacon. That's why they need to learn the lesson, God is the only God. Because if they make other gods or idols, serve other religions, they do that not because they think that piece of wood is God. I mean, it's foolish. We just made that idol ourselves. We know it's not really God. But the thing is, that can't talk, so it can't tell me what to do. And my flesh then can take control, and I can be God, and I can do what I want to do. And you say, you're doing what you want to do. Oh, no, I'm not. I'm a very religious person. I made an idol. Bow down to it. I am paying homage to God here. I am reverencing God. It gives your flesh an excuse. Following other gods, whether it be the pagan gods of the Egyptians or the Philistines or whatever culture Israel is in, they can bow down to that idol or do the things of that religion, and it gives them an excuse where they can basically cover up their sin by saying, well, I'm okay. If I just said I wanted to do what I wanted to do and I just do it, well, yeah, of course I wouldn't be right with God. But look at me. I go to this temple. I bow down to the Buddha or whatever the idol is, and I try to do what that religion tells me to do. And so that makes me a good person. So basically an idol or other gods or religion is just an excuse for making myself God, because if you make a religion up, you make the rules. So you make up what you want to do. Look, for example, look at Matthew 23. Look at what the Pharisees did. Jesus said in Mark 7, he says, full well you reject the commandment of God that ye may keep your own tradition. So they said, well, your disciples, they're not clean because they're eating corn without washing their hands. Our tradition, the tradition of the elders, states that you must wash your hands before you eat. They're not doing it, so they're not right with God. See, they made a rule that they don't mind following. And Jesus calls them out in Matthew 23:23. Matthew 23:23. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For ye pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin. So the law told them, Levitical law, that they were to give 10% of their increase in crops and animals, etc., the things that they had for that year. Give the 10% to the Levites so that they have food to have for their service, knowing all those laws and everything. And so the Pharisees say, look at us. We are good, Bible-believing, God-following people. Because God says to tithe. And not only are we giving 10% of our crops and our animals, I mean, we're tithing down to the spices. I mean, we're tithing everything. Look at how wonderful we are. But they have omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith. These ought ye to have done, and not to leave the other undone. They brought a woman in John 8. They brought a woman. Look over in John 8. Look at what they did here. John 8. Verse 3. Jesus is there. John 8, verse 3. And the scribes and Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken in adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, they said unto him, Master, this woman was taken in adultery in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned, but what sayest thou? Now we just read Leviticus 20, and it says that if a man and a woman commit adultery, then both are to be stoned. They're both to be killed, and they would be killed by stoning. Okay, so that's what the law says. What's wrong with this picture, though? The law says there's a man and a woman committing adultery, and you kill both. And in fact, if you went into the law in further detail, it actually says that for sure, if there's adultery, for sure the man is to be killed. But if the adultery occurs in the country and no one's around there and it's found out, you give the woman the benefit of the doubt. Being the weaker of the two, perhaps she was raped and tried to get out of it, but you don't know. There's no one around to help her. So in that case, the man would be killed, and the woman, you give her the benefit of the doubt and you let her go. So the point is, if there are two people committing adultery and they're both doing it consensual, you kill them both. But if there's a question as to if it's rape or not, you kill the man. So bottom line is, in all cases of adultery, the man is killed. And in most cases, the woman is killed. But it says here in verse 4, Master, this woman was taken adultery in the very act. Okay, if she is in adultery in the very act, then there's a man in adultery in the very act at the same time. And the law says you definitely kill the man, you probably kill the woman. In this case, it's probably in the city, and if it's caught in the very act, then you know if it's rape or not. So you're going to kill both of them. Where's the man? Yeah, the law says you're to stone the woman, but where's the man? Personally, I think the man is right there. I think it's one of the Pharisees, and it's a trap. He's trying to get rid of the woman, and so he's trying to get Jesus to kill her, and then he'll go commit adultery with somebody else. That's what I think. Doesn't say that, but that's what I think. But the point is, you can see, this is going back to Matthew 23. They had this form of godliness that they tithe of meant they tithe their spices. But when it comes to, this is a weightier matter. You know, certainly you should tithe your spices according to the law. But what's more important, that you tithe down to your spices, or that you obey the law as far as punishment for committing adultery? Well, certainly the adultery one is better. But you can see they've omitted, they're not following the law. Because if the woman is caught in the very act, the man is caught in the very act, you got to kill the man, guaranteed. And the woman, you're probably going to kill her. But the man wasn't brought. The man isn't mentioned. They're not worried about justice is the point. What they're doing is they've created traditions and laws to try to make themselves look good. So you'll say, well, you're not serving God. Look at you, you're committing adultery. Oh no, I'm a good servant of God. Look at the tithes I'm doing. They have this form of godliness and following laws to make themselves look good. And that's what religion does. Religion, when you create an idol, or you create like Baal worship or Molech worship or Ashtaroth worship, all these different religions, the Egyptian gods, all these different religions that you see in the Old Testament or that you see today. The whole purpose of it is you've got laws that you don't mind following so that you have a form of godliness, so that you can do the stuff in your flesh that you really want to do and get away with it. Because then if anybody questions you about it, you could say, oh, no, look at what I'm doing. I'm a holy person. give you another example. John, later on there, John 18 maybe. Yes, John 18. Here you go. You're probably familiar with Jesus and what happened with him being arrested. They arrested him. They tried him. They tried to find fault with him. They couldn't find any fault with him. So then they brought false witnesses. But they couldn't get the false witnesses to agree with each other because they're false witnesses. Jesus didn't have any sin. How are you going to lawfully punish him? So they make stuff up. And then when you make stuff up, they get caught in their own lies. So then they end up claiming that Jesus committed blasphemy by saying that he was God, although they didn't lawfully try him. So the whole trial of sentencing Jesus to death, and I'm sure you're familiar with that and everything, the whole trial of sentencing Jesus to death by the Jews was completely against the law. If you followed the law says there's going to be a prophet, and there's going to be a Messiah, and Jesus fit the bill. But they didn't even look at that. They just wanted to kill him. So it's obvious that what they did to Jesus in crucifying him and all the events led up to it are completely unlawful, ungodly. It's the worst thing they could do, really. And yet, here we are in John 18:28. So that's what happened before. Now, they're going to bring Jesus to the Roman governor and get him tried. Because they could stone him, but they want him crucified. They got such hatred for Jesus. They don't want him just to die through stoning. They want him to suffer the cruelest, most torturous death possible. So they're trying to crucify him. So John 18:28. Then led they Jesus from Caiaphas, that's the high priest, unto the hall of judgment. So to the Roman governor there to be judged. And it was early, and they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. Typical form of godliness. Our law says that we would be defiled in eating the Passover if we're in this judgment hall when he is sentenced to crucifixion. Therefore, because we are real godly people, that we serve the Lord, we do what God says, then we will not be defiled for the Passover by being in that judgment hall when Pilate sentences him to death. We will not participate in that because we're good, godly people. Well, look at what they just did. All the unlawful things. I mean, what's worse? Is it worse to take the Son of God, your Messiah, and unlawfully sentence him to death? Or is it worse to be in the judgment hall when the Roman governor is sentencing him, and so as a result, you eat the Passover anyway, even though you're defiled from that? I mean, what do you think defiles you more from eating the Passover? What they did before the judgment hall, or what was in the judgment hall? Well, obviously, it's what they did beforehand. But see, they got this form of godliness. So if anybody's ever questioned them, oh no, we're good, godly people, because we would not go into that judgment hall to eat the Passover. And that's what all these religions and idol worship and all this stuff outside of God has to do. It's if I create a religion, even in this case, where they take the Mosaic law and they manipulate it to create their own traditions and commandments, what they're doing is they're coming up with stuff that they don't mind following as the rules, and then the evil that they want to do, they'll just sort of continue doing, and you don't really notice it. And if anybody questions them, they'll say that they're godly because of things like this. Oh, I didn't defile myself in eating the Passover. And that's what religion is all about. Religion and idolatry worship is a cop-out. It's a form of deception to where your flesh can make your own rules so that you can follow your own rules and do the evil of your heart and still look good. That's what it's all about. And so these rules with God, which I see we're out of time, so we'll do this next week. These rules with God, the bottom line is they need to learn that God is the only God, so God makes the rules. So that's why they can't make a graven image. They can't have other gods. They can't have other religions. They can't manipulate God's commandments. is because if God is the only God and God makes the rules, then you got to follow Him. And you're not going to follow Him because you're vile in your flesh. So then you'll learn the lesson of it and you'll trust in God to save you, and He'll give you His righteousness instead of you trying to have your own. And it eliminates all your pride. And this right here is what churchianity doesn't want to follow. And that's why you got all these different denominations. And sure, they'll do just like the Pharisees. They'll quote Scripture, and they've got their so-called laws. And some of it may be, good scriptural, biblical, dispensational things we should do today. But there's a lot of minutia that's added to try to create a form of godliness so that they look good to others, and then they continue to do their evil stuff in the background. The reason they go after the transgenders and the homosexuals is because then that way you won't see the adultery and the pornography and the premarital sex that they're doing in the background. They're just as bad in their sexual sin, these churches, as these people that are outside of it. But if we point the fingers at the other people and what they're doing, then maybe you won't notice what we're doing. And so they make themselves God by manipulating rules and putting people under legal. The reason churches are into legalism is because then they can make their own rules, twist it around, twist scriptures around to make it appear like God is teaching that, make their own rules, follow those rules, and then they look godly, and then they condemn the other people who aren't following the rules, and so then you don't notice what they're doing in the background. And then they look godly, and they can continue. So they have their form of godliness, but they continue to do the evil desires of their heart. And that's what God is trying to get them to avoid with these rules with God. We'll go through them next time, but you see, if you try to get somebody to serve another God in the Mosaic Law, kill them. You got somebody who's a wizard or a witch, kill them. You got somebody doing a medium familiar spirit, anything that has anything to do with getting away from this truth, that God is the only God, and get into satanic stuff or just religion or images, you kill that person. Because this is what you need to know. Because if you know God is the only God, and God makes the rules, and you can't manipulate God to make yourself look good with your religion. So we'll get into the details of that next time. Let's close with a word of prayer. Dear Lord, we thank you for the love you commended to us through sending your Son Jesus Christ to die for our sins. We recognize how vile our flesh is, and so help us, Lord, that since we've believed the gospel too, let the Holy Ghost teach us the Word of God, to let Christ live in us, and to show your love to others, so that they may desire to be saved and come into the knowledge of the truth, to bring you glory. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.